Welcome to the Flute 360 podcast, where we incorporate a panoramic view of flute-related topics. I am your host, Heidi K. Begay, and this is episode 75, The Parallels Between Podcasting and Music Making. Today's sponsor is brought to you by J&K Productions. Did you know that not only are they a production company for podcasts, but they are a recording company for musicians? Any musical recording needs that you may have, J&K Productions can fulfill that need. They have all the necessary equipment and expertise to record your next flute recording for college or graduate auditions, competitions, summer festivals, or a flute album. J&K Productions can record any setup imaginable, from solo flute, small chamber, flute and piano, and much more. Consider J&K Productions for your next recording project. Contact them at jkproductions.media. Two podcast hosts, Caity Massoud and Heidi Begay, sit down to talk about their past year-and-a-half journey through podcasting. Listen to today's episode about the lessons they've learned through this medium and how that has positively affected their flute playing. Hello, everyone. Today, I'm with Dr. Caity Massoud, and she is a flutist and the host of Flute Center of New York's podcast titled Flute Unscripted. Welcome, Caity.
Thank you so much for having me.
For sure. I'm so glad that we got to do this podcast collaboration.
I am too. This is actually the first time I've ever done an interview not face-to-face. So this is really cool. It's very convenient and I love it. And it's also very different for me.
Yeah, well, there you go. We're always learning. And with this medium of podcasting, it's like, oh, wow, you guys are in the 4th season and this is your first phone interview.
I know, it's crazy. Well, we're really fortunate in that we have a lot of really special flutists that come in through our door all the time. And it's New York City. So there's a ton of interesting people passing through. And so I can usually grab someone for just 30 or 40 minutes and kind of listen in on what they have to say or pick their brain for a little bit. So it's been very fortunate that way. I think if we weren't in New York City, I don't know if it would be possible.
Yeah. And that's where I find myself in Fort Worth. You know,
right.
There are great flutists in this area, but the majority of the people I want to talk and pick their brains is outside of Texas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you just got to talk with a ton of people at NFA. I saw you had a live podcasting table set up and you were chatting with a ton of people. That must have been very busy for you.
Yeah. Thanks for asking. It was busy. I counted up this morning how many people I talked to. Because I was going around saying I talked to 40, but I knew that was wrong.
Oh, my God.
But I knew it was wrong. It was actually 24.
Oh, okay. That's still a lot for a short span for only, however many days.
Yeah. It literally, in my brain, I guess I doubled it.
Well, it is draining. Do you find that, doing podcasting and hosting and talking with people and being the one that's trying to come up with interesting questions and ideas and formatting, that it's kind of exhausting? And I feel like I do one interview and I'm kind of done for the day. I feel kind of pooped and drained.
I agree. Yeah, it is draining. And I think more draining than people realize.
Yeah.
Just because I have to be on,
Yeah, exactly.
I'm listening and I'm, thinking of the questions beforehand, but it feels like because you're always engaged,
yep,
your brain is just going a mile a minute.
Yeah. And I think maybe something people, and maybe it will be interesting for our listeners too, that people don't realize that there is a lot of that going on. It's not just you casually sitting down with someone and just, let's hope we come up with some interesting material. You feel like you have to do your homework ahead of time and be prepared. And I always feel a little bit of pressure, oh God, I hope that it turns out okay and it's interesting and they don't just give me a one-word answer yes or no. And then you're kind of stuck there with an uninteresting interview.
Yeah, I can't wait I think this is Caity, this is amazing. We're like just getting into our world of podcasting and Flute instantly. And we've begun, obviously, but we haven't really begun the conversation. But we're just so excited to get into it that it's natural for us. And I think that's great for the listeners to see our passion in that regard.
Right. How long have you been doing this for?
Actually, yeah. I just looked up your Flute Center of New York date, and you guys started 1 month after me.
Oh, wow. Okay, great.
Yeah.
I was going to ask what spurred you to start everything and get into it.
Yeah. So I started March of 18, and it was actually my DMA project.
Oh, great.
Yeah, to graduate with my DMA. And it was, I can't really say dissertation because it really is not a true dissertation. But the first 2 series, episodes 1 through 8, was my research.
Okay.
Yeah, because my committee, can you imagine? I know you have your doctorate.
Yes.
Can you imagine the committee saying, oh, yeah, just talk to like Caity and Cobus Detroit and Marion Gadigian, and then you have your doctorate.
And then you'll be done. No.
Yeah, no. If it was that easy.
Yeah.
But yeah, so no, the first 4 episodes were based on my research on health, and then the second was more entrepreneurial. But yeah, and then from there, my committee just wanted some longevity with the project so that way it could continue with me post-graduation and into my career. And since then, it's just snowballed.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So Flute Unscripted, I believe, is like a business component to the flute shop.
It is. Yeah, it's a little bit different because I know a lot of other podcasts are usually edited, created, produced by an entity, and then you have to work to get your sponsorship and your funding to kind of make all the pieces work and pay everybody to do all the work that goes into it, and then to get it released and get listeners. We're kind of unique here in that we do have a nice audience of people already engaged with things that we're doing. We have clients that follow us, and we love our clients and we're very close with them. And we just are always trying to think of new ways to create content and kind of form a community with the flute world, because we don't just sell flutes here. We have master classes, we have events, we try to provide information on our website about flutes so that you can be informed. So this was just like another avenue, and it was kind of an idea of Flute Centers, and I was looking for a project to kind of take on my own at the time. And so I said, you know what, I want to take this on. It's something that's really interesting to me. I don't know anything about it. I have no clue how to do any editing. I don't know anything really about podcasting. I had listened to maybe like 2 shows, but I would not say I was an avid podcaster by any means. So I said, let this be my little baby. I want to kind of like take it under my wing and see what I can do with it. And they were gracious enough to just let me kind of go. So it is a part of my other duties here already. So the nice part is, I didn't need to find sponsorship because I already work here, and I just fill it into my work schedule. So it's definitely been a big learning process. In the meantime, I have learned a lot and started from scratch and just did a lot of research.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would say like the most helpful things were just, forums online or different articles about podcasting. Also just listening to more podcasts. I felt like if I'm going to do this, I should listen to a lot more and see what's out there and different kinds of podcasting. And I know that you do a lot of interviews, and you also do some other shows where you're just talking about like competitions and how to prepare for auditions and advice and holistic aspects. Here we just do the interviews. And so I wanted to get more comfortable with interviewing and kind of how the flow goes and also the dynamic and the banter. And so I just started listening to lots of interview podcasts and kind of digesting those. And that definitely helped a lot.
Nice. Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of parallels between your story and my story.
Yeah.
I did not have a podcasting background. I did not go to school for podcasting. But it's funny because as I was talking to people at NFA, their question was the same as yours. How did, you get going? And I answered the same way, with the DMA paper. But I said, life is funny because, well, one, I'm a natural talker. Any of my family and friends know that I love to talk. So putting me in front of a microphone and saying talk is, fun.
That's good for you. Yeah.
And second, it's funny because when I was a little girl, I had to go through speech therapy. And this is something I have not said live. And I noticed that it was something I was saying at NFA, and I was like, that's interesting. I'm sharing this, and I don't mind, but it's because I feel the need to share it just because I get so nervous sometimes before an interview to pronounce somebody's name correctly.
Right.
You know, or a composer's name. And it's not because I don't know. It's just like my tongue sometimes doesn't want to work the way I want it to work.
I totally get that. Yeah.
So
also in the moment, sometimes you just say, your brain just flubs and you just say the wrong thing the wrong way. And then it's recorded.
Yeah. But yeah, so it's ironic because it's like, I'm already self-conscious about my pronunciations and things like that. And life is like, oh, here's a platform where you get to talk in front of a lot of people. To make that very apparent. I don't know. It's just, it feels like a magnifying glass sometimes.
Oh, it does. Yeah. Did you have a hard time listening back to yourself talking in the beginning?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was one of the things I jotted down for today was being okay with listening to your own voice.
Yes.
Yeah.
It definitely makes you realize your tendencies, for better or for worse. And when you were talking about kind of parallels to flute playing, I feel like it's the same thing. Like when you're preparing for any sort of performance, you know, you want to listen back to your recording and it's painful, and we avoid doing it because it's not a pleasant experience, because it's usually, you know, you're taking a microscope to your playing and you're hearing things you didn't know you were doing, and it can feel overwhelming and daunting. And I feel like it's the same with podcasting. I know I listen back to all my interviews and I can hear that I've changed, and my voice has maybe changed a little bit over the seasons too, which is interesting. And it's just a part of becoming more comfortable and kind of realizing when you do things that you didn't know you did.
Yeah, I agree. And a lot of my guests this weekend at NFA at the William S. Haynes booth said, you know, when will this episode go out? And I told them, and they said, well, that was fun. I had fun with you, but I'm dreading it. I said, why? And they're like, I don't want to hear my voice back.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I get that a lot here too. Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah, which is funny because a lot of people are performers, so they're used to that sensation or that idea of something will get heard by a real audience at some point. This is not just in a vacuum, but yeah, they're still uncomfortable with their voice and with people hearing them talk.
Yeah. And then they would follow up and say, are you okay with it? I'm like, well, yeah, now I am. But the first couple months I wasn't.
Right.
Yeah.
It definitely takes time.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me back in the day, like this is like so 90s, but when we had, you know, regular telephones, you know, landlines, and you had, you know, your voice message. Mm-hmm. I mean, we still do on our cell phones, but I don't know. It feels more like landline phone thing.
Right, right.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's so funny.
Well, that's funny. You're saying too, that it's comfortable for you to talk in front of people and that you enjoy chatting, because it's also kind of interesting. I feel completely the opposite way. I'm very introverted. I do not like talking to a lot of people. I like one-on-one conversations. I feel comfortable with more so than like large groups and having to be at like large parties and things like that. But I still would rather just be left alone and have to talk to anybody at all. So it's definitely been good for me, just like flute playing as well. Like I would say as a performer, it's not my first inclination to say, I want to be in front of a room full of people, because it like feeds me to be in front of so many audience members. And I love standing out in front. It's definitely uncomfortable. And sometimes I dread it. And then it's this weird sensation of after you do it, and the interview's over, the performance is over, you do feel some sort of like adrenaline and you feel amped up, and it's a good feeling. But it's getting to that process is always a little like dragging your feet, for me at least. Yeah, no, I can relate to that definitely on some levels for sure. Yeah. Thanks for being vulnerable and sharing that you find yourself being more of an introvert. Well, yeah, I think it's important, because something else I've realized talking to my guests as well is that everybody is a very different sort of personality. And just because you're introverted doesn't mean you can't do extroverted sort of things. And just because you're, you know, a very gregarious or outgoing kind of person doesn't mean you can't do things that are more quiet or things that are alone, like practicing alone for hours a day. So there's definitely, I find it interesting that even with our varied personalities, there's still lots that we can do. I love that. Yeah.
It resonates with me because since I am naturally more of an extrovert, that was one thing that actually got in my way with the interview process because I was not okay with silence.
Yeah.
And I noticed that I would get so excited, just listening to you. Old Heidi a year ago would be not intentionally trying to talk over you, but I would be talking over you because I was so excited. And
interesting.
I would listen back and I was like, whoa, Heidi, like, put the reins on. You need to literally take a break. Because, I just would be like, yeah, and I would do these little like pops of excitement, but it was literally on top of, your thought process, and it could come across as rude, and that was not my intention at all. But yeah, so when you said introverted, dabbling into being a little extroverted and vice versa, I was like, yep, hey.
You had to go the other way.
I had to go the other way.
Something else I thought, we could talk about today are other things not to do during interviews and podcasting. Do you have any other? I feel like that's a big one, right? Not talking over someone and finding that right balance between how much they talk and how much you talk, because they're kind of the star of the episode. Is there anything else that you kind of have on your list of your big no-nos?
Big no-nos. Oh, man. One of my big no-nos is I learned specifically, I believe it was Flute 360's episode 40 or 41 with Ho Fan Lee. He and I had a great interview when I hit, record, but you could tell, and he's very candid about this, so I don't feel bad sharing this. He was a little nervous. And I think, again, it just goes with his personality of being more of an introvert. And so for a while, it took me some time to pull him out of his shell. Well, finally, at the end of the interview, when I did, and we were comfortable with each other, I hit stop because it was the, goodbye. And then he continued to talk, and he knew I hit stop. And he just opened up to me like none other. It was the most genuine conversation ever. And I was like, oh, fun. This is what your Thumbport followers want to hear. He's like, and that magic. I didn't hit, out of respect and because he was talking to me, I didn't hit record again. But without sounding sleazy, I didn't want to hit record again, but I wish I had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can totally relate to that. That's happened a lot to me here. Not with anybody specifically that I'll name, but it is definitely a total shift where when you hit record, there's walls that are put up and people are nervous or they feel like they have to filter everything they say, which is understandable. A lot of people have fans and audience members that listen to them and they feel like they have an image that they have to uphold, but there's some really like juicy, really good stuff that I think is so interesting that they don't feel comfortable sharing until kind of I close the computer screen and I start to unpack everything. And then they just really open up with all this really good info and stuff that I think is really relatable. But yeah, I totally agree. If you don't have their permission and you can tell that they don't want that to be aired, then you just can't. You just have to let it go. But it's just such a shame sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. And then just what I'm hearing too is building that trust.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot.
That's hard to do.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's funny because in a normal conversation over a year and a half ago, I would have never said, oh, this is a perfect time to hit record. This is a great podcast episode.
Yeah.
But now, like when I was in Romania and I met Martin Godoy and Aileen Razy, we would go out to dinners after the rounds. And it was just a perfect podcast episode.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And I just met both of them. They're both Texas-based musicians. So you can't really say, after 5 minutes in, like, oh, I just met you, but could I hit record on my phone? Because this is that just sounds weird. Yeah, just building that trust and, having your guests know that they can rely on you not to share those intimate moments, that are off screen. I think that's important. I
think also that they trust you with editing. Even before we just talked today, I asked you like quickly, all right, Heidi, you're going to take out if I make a mistake or if I say something silly or if I say too much, like you'll edit it out, right? And you said, yeah. And I feel like just giving people that reassurance before you hit record too, I can feel kind of their shoulders start to relax a little bit. And then they like sit a little bit more comfortably knowing that there's an out. It's not video recorded is a huge relief for a lot of people. They don't want to have to worry about their appearance or how they look while they're talking. So just reassuring them that there's no video, it's just purely audio. Things like that make people feel a little bit more comfortable. I was wondering if for your guests, do you ever send them the episodes first to approve before you release anything?
Good question. It depends on them. If the person specifically says, can you send me the link before it launches? Of course I will.
Yeah.
But if they don't specifically ask, I don't, just because it's more time consuming.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
I'm in the same boat.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the other thing too. I don't think they probably do to some degree, but there's a lot of production that goes into something like this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so if they do not ask for that link, I'm like, yay, that's one less email.
I know. And you have help with all of your post-production stuff, right?
See, yeah, I have this perfect marriage, literally like on a personal and a business side. That's why Lisa Garner-Santa at Texas Tech said, I think podcasting and doing this podcast for your DMA project would be perfect because she knew I had the equipment and she knew that I had the help with my husband, Eric. And so this production, I mean, you probably do way more than I do with the technological side of things, but it would not be possible without Eric's expertise being an audio engineer.
Yeah, it's something that is a huge challenge for me and it's really hard and I'm always learning, but I wish I had the help because it is really nice to not have to worry about that piece or to not stress about it and just know that it will be taken care of at the end. And it is time consuming too. It's like a whole nother job, just sifting through and editing and taking things out and connecting them back together and adjusting levels. And it's a lot.
But kudos to you. I am so proud of you. And just like,
thank you.
Yeah. You have so much patience. Oh my goodness.
It's definitely been fun. I have to say, if I didn't like doing, these kind of creative things on my own, I probably would not enjoy it. But like I was saying before, I'm introverted anyway. I like doing things alone. And so it's a chance for me to just kind of be on my computer and be doing a little busy work and kind of plug away at getting stuff done. So I like it. I like the little menial tasks of all of it.
Cool. So we talked about, you asked a great question about what not to do. And we had dabbled in a little bit before that of, some parallels between flute playing and podcasting. Is there another big takeaway that you've learned from this medium of being a podcaster to being a flutist?
Well, I would say there's the huge piece of organization that's really been key. And I think another thing that maybe people don't realize goes into podcasting, but a lot of flutists know that goes into preparing for your performances as a flutist. It's all about the work you do beforehand. And it's the same with this. And something that I've learned is that the less I prepare and the more I think that I can just wing it and it will be okay, that never really works the way you think it will. And it's just never as good as when you really spend the time to do the extra research, spend that extra, hour just doing a little bit more reading and seeing what else you can dig up. And the same with practicing, just going in and seeing what else you can kind of nitpick and what else can be improved. And it always does pay off in the end. There's, something good always comes from it. I usually find. And that, at least for me, I know some people can just say they can wing it for a performance and it's fantastic. For me, it's all about, I think, the preparation because it adds to being a little bit more relaxed too, which I usually perform better when I'm more at ease. And so just knowing in the back of my mind, I've done everything I can do. I went the extra mile. I'm as prepared as I can be. And now I can just relax and it will come out however it comes out, but I did my best. And that really has helped.
I love that. Yeah. One of my things I wrote down for today was just content and being prepared on that content. And the same is true for our repertoire. And then to piggyback off of that, taking it one step further, for me, it's going, yes, we've planned, yes, we've practiced, but for me, I get so tied up in, oh, you put in all these hours, you should be fine on stage, blah, 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 doing air quotes on should. But then going with the flow. I have such a hard time just improvising in the sense of the way it's going to go is the way it's going to go. And when I control it too much, saying, oh, you've prepared, you've practiced, I get uptight. So same thing with like these talks, like I can think about the topic and like what you said, researching the person or the background. It's great. And I need that too. I love that organization. But then to go in there too uptight, it loses the natural flow.
Yeah, that is so accurate. And I completely agree because, I didn't even really think of that. Now that you're saying it, it's so clear to me. Like there's been times where I do my research and I think I have the perfect questions and that I'm going to, nail it with the interview and I have everything planned. And then the guest just totally deviates or they talk about something I didn't think they were going to spend a lot of time on and they want to talk about it for like 20 minutes and then we're off in another world. And I'm like, oh, I can't, the question I wanted to ask really isn't relevant anymore. Am I going to really try and come back to that? It seems totally pointless at this point. And it's like you're grappling with how much you have to stick to your expectations and how much you're just like, well, let's just let that go out the window and just go with the flow. And yeah, I think that's super important.
Yeah. There are times when same thing, I would have these questions mapped out. Well, within, just say, for example, like asking a composer, what's your background, and then they talk about the background. Well, say the second question is, I don't know, what's your main instrument or what instruments do you compose on? And they've already answered that question in the first one. Yeah. So if you're not listening and you go, and they're
right.
I can just imagine their face going, were you not listening to me? Because yeah. So going with the flow. And like you said, I love that word deviating. Conversations deviate all the time, all the time. And being willing to trust that flow is kind of exciting. It's like a thrill, but at the same time, you're like, okay, where is this going to go?
Nerve-wracking too. Yeah.
So if you think about us, performing as flutists, I mean, how many times do things not go planned? On the stage and say chamber, I don't know, say the clarinetist does a little extra, this or that. And you're like, whoa, okay, I wasn't expecting that. And let me bounce off of that and respond to it. I don't know. It's interesting to see those parallels.
Do you hope, I hope that you see more flute podcasts happening in the future and more people kind of into the medium? Because I think it is taking off and I see more projects and I love your project and I love that we can kind of do this collaboration and reach out to a lot of people. And I just hope that I see more good content kind of come out there.
Yeah, I agree. I think the more flute podcasts that are out there only feeds the fire. It adds fuel to the fire. I think there is plenty of room for anyone who wants to put out their own platform because we're all unique individuals. We all have our own experiences, our own story, and our own voice, And there's more voices out there than Caity, Heidi, Viviana, and, the 4 or 5 that are out there. And I think if, there are more platforms, then people will be searching for all of the different flute podcasts, when they type in their friend's name, let's say, Joe, and then they're like, oh, wow, Caity has one and Heidi has one. And you know what I mean? It's a community.
It really is. And I think that it's a really cool platform too, because it's so accessible. I mean, it's free. You can listen to it anywhere, especially these days. I feel like a lot of us are on the road, traveling a lot. I know a lot of people recently were traveling to NFA. It's a good thing to do that makes you feel like you're maybe doing something productive. It's educational, but you're not practicing. And it's something that's just fun also and interesting to do. And you don't have to sit down and find an article. So I do like that it's so accessible and that it's right at your fingertips if you want it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It really is accessible. And if you think about the world we live in, we're commuting and we're running in between teaching and playing and, washing the dishes and doing the laundry. And if we can just put in our earbuds and listen to great content as we are doing the dishes. I don't know. I think we live in a world that, of course, is very go, go, go. And, yes, we need time to chill or whatever. But I think especially like our flute community of flutists tend to be very overachievers.
Yes.
And having the accessibility of listening through our earbuds content that we can use maybe throughout the week in our lessons or whatever. You don't have to, put that magazine up. You can just listen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I hope also that more studio teachers will get into podcasting and listen and use these as a resource too, because I think there's a lot out there where they're fun and they're cool to listen to. And it's a nice way to like pass the travel time, but also there's like some good stuff. In your podcast as well. I love a lot of the episodes that you have that are really like honed in on specific skills and specific things, but they're really great resources for students and for young people that need the extra advice.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. And I feel the same way about your podcast as well.
Hey.
And that comes up on a very interesting topic, because if I'm talking to, or if you're talking to like a flutist or composer, flute maker, whatever, these are primary sources. I mean, this is coming from the horse's mouth.
You know what? Maybe, Heidi, maybe someday we will be in somebody's DMA dissertation as a primary source.
Yes. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, then we'll have made it.
Yeah. That's a big check box to check. I'm looking forward to that day.
I know.
Yeah. But, even think about, I won't name names, and going back to that trust element, but, there are some people that we get to interview that are perhaps a little bit older, age-wise. Yeah. And it just happens to be that, life will take its course. And I've had people come up to me and say, we need to put that interview and archive it in the Library of Congress. I had not thought about that. That is insane. Do you know what I mean? And
yeah,
it could literally, I did not intend that a year and a half ago. You know what I mean? I had no idea that would be an element or something that would need to be discussed at some point.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because our owner here, Phil Unger, also, he was one that brought up that viewpoint to me, because I also had never thought of it that way. And he has we have like an old photo album here at the store of some guests from ages and ages ago that when he first got started, some flutists that would come through this store, and like Ron Paul and people like that. And so those are the archives that he has with little notes of what they did on their visit here. And he mentioned, this is important because you're speaking with people and getting stories and getting information that will be like the photo album of the future, where people can look back on it, listen back, and see these helpful tidbits and things to remember them by.
I love that. Yeah. And the other thing that it brings up for me too, is to piggyback off of that, is just us as musicians, what we do. Music is an aural art, right? So yes, we can read an interview that has been maybe published in Flute Talk or whatever, but with this podcasting realm, you get to hear the inflection or the tone or the character of said person. And just being a musician and what we do by listening, I think there's something special with listening to that interview and hearing your favorite flutist or composer talk and express himself or herself through aural means.
Right. And you get to hear what they get excited about in the moment, and where they take a conversation. And I do think that part's super interesting, and kind of to hear their inflections about everything and the characteristics and the way they speak. Yeah, I think that's really cool.
Yeah. One interview that's coming to mind is Gary Schocker. And here, I'm talking to him over the phone, and he has his grandfather clock chiming in the background. And, and he's feeding his cats, and you can hear the clinking of the bowls and the chimes, and it's like you get a peek into his home, and you can't get that any other way.
No, you cannot.
Yeah. So, things like that, being type A over here. At first I was like, oh my gosh, sit in a quiet room, and then when you listen back to it, you're like, oh, that is so cool. Yeah, it's a really neat platform, and I love how a lot of our insights and observations are syncing up so beautifully.
Yeah, it's interesting. We have a lot of parallels, which I didn't anticipate, but it's really cool. And also just really special to have someone else kind of going through this at the same time, because I do feel like there's not that many podcasts out there about flute and not that many people creating the content like we are. So you can feel alone sometimes. So it's nice to feel like there's someone else out there going through what I'm going through.
Awesome. Well, I'm so glad we reached out and connected, because I agree with what you just said. It does feel lonely sometimes. Yeah. And do you ever get the whole, I don't know, I told some of my Flute 360 listeners at NFA, because they came up and said, hi, I'm so-and-so. I'm like, oh, it's so nice to put a name to a face. Because sometimes it feels like I'm talking into this microphone and I'm just like, hello, anyone out there?
It's nice. It's really special when we have people either send us emails or come in the store and they realize that I'm the one that's helping them, and then I'm doing the podcast, and they say, oh, you're the person from the podcast. I really like what you do. And I'm sure they're just being nice and being lovely, but it really does mean a lot, because you're putting all this time and all this energy and all this effort into creating something that you just want people to like and to enjoy. And then you just put it out there, and there's never really any feedback. It's gone out into the void, and then it's over. And so you move on to the next thing. So it's nice for people to actually recognize that they are listening and they like what you're doing. It feels really good. So I'd say everyone keep that up, please. We really like it.
It does help our egos just a little bit.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Oh, shoot. So I do a segment called Picks at the end of my episodes. I know this is so ad lib and I didn't prepare you for this, and I apologize. But
it's okay.
It could be anything. It could be your favorite chocolate or movie or book, anything that you want to choose as a pick.
I have maybe something. Well, I don't know if it's a pick, but the first thing that came to mind is actually my husband was telling me that recently at one of his jobs, they asked him to name a guilty pleasure music or something he listens to that he doesn't really tell people he listens to. And in the moment, he was like, I don't really know. And then he got home and he said, someone asked me at this gig, what my guilty pleasure music is. It's not jazz and not classical. And I was like, oh, it's easy. It's Disney music, because you're a huge Disney fan. I was going to say he makes us go almost every year, but I happily oblige when we bring our daughter with us. And so we go pretty often, and people think that we're crazy, but it's just really fun and special to go there and have be in a little bubble where we don't watch the news. We don't really look at our phones, and we just have fun with our daughter and just kind of be like kids again and kind of disconnect. And so I know I love to travel, and I love to travel the world and go to exotic places and cool places. We're going to Scotland in a couple of weeks, actually, but people think we're always crazy for going back to Disney World out of everywhere we could go. And I just feel like that's our guilty pleasure. So maybe my pick is to find something that maybe you're ashamed of, but that you can disconnect and enjoy fully. It definitely helps.
Nice. I love it. I have not been to Disney World.
Oh, you need to go.
It sounds like it.
I will say some people have a love-hate thing with it. Some people really hate it, but we both grew up going when we were kids. So we're used to going often throughout our childhood. So it just seemed like a natural extension to keep the tradition going.
Oh, beautiful. I love that. So I will end on your pick, because that was so well said.
Yay.
I feel like I can't top that off.
Oh, no.
Well, thank you, Caity, so much for your time and talent and your insights. And I agree with what you said prior to the pick. I'm so glad that we collaborated, and it feels like just speaking to another flutist / podcaster is very supportive. And it feels good to know that somebody out there is walking a very similar walk to me. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I appreciate that comment.
Well, thanks for having me, Heidi. This was all your idea, and I'm really excited about it. And it was really a pleasure to get to chat with you. I'm sorry I missed you at NFA, so I didn't get to see you, but it was really nice getting to know you a little bit better this way.
Thank you, Caity.
You're welcome.
Today's sponsor is brought to you by J&K Productions. Did you know that not only are they a production company for podcasts, but they are a recording company for musicians? Any musical recording needs that you may have, J&K Productions can fulfill that need. They have all the necessary equipment and expertise to record your next flute recording for college or graduate auditions, competitions, summer festivals, or a flute album. J&K Productions can record any setup imaginable, from solo flute, small chamber, flute and piano, and much more. Consider J&K Productions for your next recording project. Contact them at jkproductions.media. Thank you for listening to the Flute 360 podcast. For more information, please visit HeidiKBegay.com. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please rate and review in the iTunes store. Let's talk about flute.